And Nikki, thank you so much for being here. We're just thrilled and want to congratulate you on being selected by the museum to go to Washington, D.C. for Women to Watch in 2024. And we just have to congratulate all of our artists for participating in New Suns. And the work was all just absolutely wonderful. And it was a fabulous exhibition. Thank you to Lauren Dickens for curating, and Jamie, again to you for putting everything together and hosting at California College of the Arts, CCA. So Jamie, I'd like to turn it back to you. And I hope that one of the things that went out today was a letter to all of our artists thanking them. And Jamie, I thought it would be nice if we would read it and then maybe post it on our, put it on, send it to everyone over our NMWA email so they could have it. And if we have time, and then I'll turn it back to you to proceed with the program.
Great, I can do that. Thank you, Lorna, so much. And hi, everyone. It's great to see you today. I'm Jamie Austin, San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA board member and also Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs at CCA. And I'm happy to help moderate this ongoing series of virtual studio visits with the NMWA Women to Watch artists, and would like to give special thanks to Lorna, to Robin, to Carol for your support in creating this series, and also to Lisa, Susan, Julia, and Katie, who are on the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA Programming Committee. Thank you for your help with planning all of this. So as Lorna mentioned, there was a letter that was sent out to all 5 artists participating in the New Suns exhibition, which you can see a shot of behind me. And Lorna just asked that we would read part of this letter, and then we can share it out through the group email as well. So this says, "Dear Adia, Kathy, Genevieve, Nikki, and Sophia, it is with deep gratitude and congratulations that I write to all of you on behalf of the executive board and entire membership of the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA to thank you for your participation in the New Suns exhibition at CCA. Your selection by curator Lauren Dickens as a candidate for Women to Watch 2024 is an outstanding achievement among Northern California women artists. Your commitment to your work and arts is nothing short of exceptional. This exhibition was very well received by the Northern California art community with an estimated 400 visitors during the 6-week showing. It was an honor to have Stephen Beal, president of CCA, and Susan Fisher-Sterling and Eileen Gutman, director and deputy director of NMWA, respectively, in attendance at our member reception. We also welcomed a number of Bay Area museum curators, such as Tim Burgard and Emma Acker from the Fine Arts Museums, Susie Cantor from the Minetti Shrem Museum, and director of BAM PFA, Julie Rodriguez Wildholm, among others. As one of our presenting artists for the New Suns exhibition, and this is to all 5 artists, we're pleased to let you know that you are all now honorary members of the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA and will receive invitations to all of our events, like the events today. And it's great to see past Women to Watch artists here. We also hope to visit your studios or do an individual online program for each of you in order to learn more about you and your practice, which is why we're here today, to learn about Nikki. Again, we thank you for all you did to make New Suns an incredible success. It is very much appreciated by all of us. And then that was signed from Lorna and from the San Francisco Advocacy for NMWA board. We can share out that letter with everyone. And we're so excited to be able to kick off this series of in-person and virtual studio visits with all 5 of these New Suns artists today. So with that, I will kind of kick us off on our official introduction, because I am very happy to be introducing artist Nicki Green, who's here with us today. And Nicki was just selected by the NMWA curators to represent Northern California in the New World's Women to Watch 2024 exhibition, which will open to the public at NMWA's newly renovated museum in Washington, D.C. on April 14th, 2024. Also joining us today is gallerist Amy Freiberg, who arranged the loan of Nicki's work for the New Suns exhibition. So thank you, Amy, for being here today as well. Nicki Green is a transdisciplinary artist working primarily in clay. Originally from New England, she completed her BFA in sculpture from the San Francisco Art Institute in 2009 and her MFA in art practice from UC Berkeley in 2018. Her work focuses on craft processes, and her sculptures, ritual objects, and various flat works explore topics such as history preservation, conceptual ornamentation, and aesthetics of otherness. I first got to know Nicki while working on an exhibition titled Trans Ecologies that was presented at the CCA Hubble Street Galleries back in 2019. And since then, she has been an artist in residence at the John Michael Kohler Art Center in Wisconsin and spent the past year as a visiting lecturer at Cal State Long Beach. Please join me in welcoming Nicki, who we weren't able to meet in person, but we're so happy to have today. And Nicki will be giving a short presentation about her practice. And then the exciting part, she will virtually tour us through her studio to see both completed and in progress work that she's doing for an upcoming exhibition at Colt Amy Freiberg Gallery in San Francisco that will take place in January 2024. So with that, I will pass it over to Nicki, and let's all welcome Nicki.
Thanks so much, Jamie. And thanks everybody at NMWA. It's such an honor to be selected to represent Northern California in the New World Show. It's really an honor and feels particularly warm as the kind of nomadic nature of life is sort of pulling me around the country for different teaching opportunities to continue to still have this anchor in the Bay Area, which really cultivated my art practice for over a decade and continues to be, I would say, my kind of artistic home. It feels particularly special. So thank you everybody so much. So like Jamie said, the plan for today is that I'm going to talk a little bit about the work in particular that was in the show in New Suns, and I'll show some images and I'll tell you a little bit about the development of that work. And then I'm going to log in to the Zoom call on my phone, and I'm going to walk you around my studio where I have a number of pieces in sort of various states of progress that'll be for an upcoming exhibition with Cult Exhibitions in San Francisco, and that'll be opening late winter, early spring in San Francisco. So I'm really excited about that, and it feels really special to get to share some of this work with you today. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Can you all see this?
Yes, that looks great.
Great, thanks. So, okay, so this is Hybrid Vessel 1 that was in the New Sun show and is behind Jamie in that install photo. And I would say that this work is really kind of where I'm at conceptually right now. This this idea of hybridity and objecthood. And when I talk about hybridity, I'm primarily pulling from some language that ceramics historian Jenny Sorkin used in a previous catalog essay for a show of mine in Boston a number of years ago, when she talked about the kind of mashup of this kind of cellular fungus texture with the kind of ornate surface painting, what I'm often thinking of as sort of like the built world or the kind of constructed world of ceramic objects and kind of ceramic vessel language. And so let me show you some details of this form. With this work, I'm really trying to think about the way that fungus is this kind of, kind of entropy, this like way that the natural world kind of takes control, for better or for worse. I would say maybe for better, but in the relationship between the organic and maybe inorganic objects in this work, there's both a hybridizing, but also a kind of almost sort of like tearing apart or destroying of this kind of Tulipier, kind of Delftware adjacent work. So you can see that the fungus is kind of like seeping into the belly of the vessel, but then also on the sides, like pulling the spouts apart. And really kind of, I think I'm just thinking about ways to hybridize the world around me. The other work in this show was some work that I made at the Kohler factory. And this piece, A Discrete History of Intimacy and Violence, was developed as I was sort of sorting through the waste like within the Kohler factory. The residency is in the factory, on the factory floor. And so I had access to these plumbing and sort of bathroom appliances. And I was thinking a lot about the ways in which these appliances, this kind of, again, built world, kind of ceramic constructed world around us, both allows us to kind of operate, sort of engage bodily functions in an interior environment, but also these objects sort of isolate, separate, categorize our bodies, and sort of force us into a kind of choreography with the world that for myself, for other trans folks, is an incredibly oppressive, many times violent engagement. And so there's this kind of complicated push-pull. So with this work, I was really thinking about the ways in which I could Frankenstein these objects into washing devices, devices that would allow trans folks to I guess, wash and sort of affirm our bodies rather than sort of I would say, pretty traditional and kind of strategic oppression of these forms in these spaces. And so this was built with urinals sort of cut apart and reassembled. And then on the other end of this spectrum, I had been building for a while fungus forms, like sort of on their own, as their own. This is Morel figure with prosthesis, where I was really thinking about the ways in which fungus as an organism is this kind of liminal, I guess I would say, sort of manifestation of otherness. It's kind of this non-animal, non-plant organism that has this kind of abject quality to it, and feeds off of death and creates this kind of proliferation that feels beautiful and sort of symbiotic and significant. And so with forms like this, and with forms like the Kohler work, that hybrid vessel form started to develop as I was trying to find ways to kind of like mash these bodies of work together and figure out how they were in relationship to each other. And then this work in particular is assembled in many sections, and then has felt padding between each section, and is kind of playing with an expansiveness of materials. And then similarly with the Kohler work, the seams between all the sections of plumbing appliances were assembled with ropes of this kind of pinky, fleshy epoxy clay that kind of allowed for this bodily quality even in these static kind of inanimate objects. So it felt like it was important to kind of give you all a context for the work that was being shown in New Sons. I also do really want to show you what's happening now in the studio and what I'm thinking about for this show with Amy in the late winter, early spring. That will be my next solo show in the Bay Area. And will also be this kind of anchor point around some fairs that I'll be doing with Amy leading up to that exhibition. So maybe I'll stop sharing my screen and log in on my phone, and then I can walk you around and sort of talk through what's happening. Okay.
I can't hear you quite yet. I see it in the participant list.
How about now?
Yes, now I do.
Great. Okay. So let me stand up here in my studio, and I am going to flip my camera around, and then I'm gonna, as sort of gently as possible so nobody gets sort of motion sick, I'm gonna walk through the studio and show you what's happening. Okay, so let's see. I'll walk to the door and show you what it looks like over here. So like I mentioned, similar to the hybrid object pieces, I've been making these mashups of fungus forms. So here's kind of a bucket, sort of in, I guess in the scale of a 5-gallon bucket that is hybridizing with fungus. You can see some support coils on the interior of this clay bucket. And then the ways in which the fungus is this organic kind of building technique that I've developed over time that allows for, I think, a contrast in texture, but also given how sort of round and, you know, primarily kind of symmetrical these vessel forms are, I'm able to create a much more sort of free form and organic build on top of the vessel as I'm sort of constructing. So that's a piece that's I'm currently building. The clay is still wet there. And then I have some pieces like this. This is unfired, but sort of drying, these kind of apothecary vessel sized objects. And for the most part, I'm building these forms by building the actual vessel and then creating some kind of scaffolding on the interior of these forms that allow it to sort of lift into space, and then I can kind of build this fungus texture around it. Here's a piece that has been fired once already, and then we'll get glaze, that kind of white base glaze onto the surface, and then all of the kind of purple painting of images on there. Let me walk around this form so you can see more of how this object sits in space. And this is a larger vessel, again, kind of 5-gallon bucket sized. And And a lot of these pieces are sort of playing with halves, sort of half and half splitting. The kind of thematic reference point for this upcoming show is the biblical concept of firmament, which is the expanse that separated or separates, I guess, the sea and the sky through the creation story. And so this idea of splitting, but also expanseness is really exciting to me. And so a lot of these forms have this kind of half exposed, half covered, or in the case of this form that we're looking at, the vessel is split in half, and that sort of splitting, the splitting is happening through the fungus, and that fungus creates kind of like a third surface, which is the kind of expanse between the halves. Here's some older, I can show you some older fungus forms. This is a slime mold piece that is quite large. I'll put my hand on it for scale. This is a quite large form that I always thought of as sort of in reference to viola fray, where it's built in many sections and then assembled with all the seams very visible. And some more sort of older fungus forms here that are kind of hanging out in the studio, these kind of large, more representational sculptures where the fungus, that kind of cellular fungus texture, becomes a really kind of exciting surface for glaze to drip and kind of collect into. And then on some of these forms, you get these really great, very satisfying drips. There's a really long one right here. And I guess I'll show you back here some more of these in process kind of hybrid forms. I've been feeling really preoccupied with both the apothecary vessel shape and the way that it kind of references the hand so directly. So this is two different apothecary forms that I'm in the process of building. And then this will be the kind of fungus housing for it. Yeah, and then I want to walk you over to see some of these figures. I built these forms at Cal State Long Beach in a residency, really like, I guess, last winter, winter of like January 2023 into the summer. And so I made these forms for the Lyon Biennale in Lyon, France. And I've been studying the Jewish immersion kind of like bathing ritual called mikvah for a really long time. And I would say that all of the work that I'm making is kind of in reference to mikvah or washing or bathing, and thinking about sort of the place of, or really like the absence of, transness in a ritual that is so kind of anchored around kind of cisgender and heterosexual kind of relationships and bodies. And so for a long time, I have been making the vessels that feel like, for me, they're referencing mikvah and referencing washing. And when I came to do this residency, specifically to engage the commission that the Biennale offered me, I wanted to kind of take a bit of a shift in form and think about the bodies that participate in the ritual bathing process. And so this is the immersing figure, kind of engaging the dunking choreography inside the mikvah itself. And these are all life size. It's kind of hard to see, but I can kind of like hold these hands here and you can see that they're all being built to the scale of my own body in the studio. So this is the immersing figure, and they're all standing on these pieces of furniture, these kind of tiled furniture forms that also have quite a bit of fungus kind of growing and kind of snaking around them. And then this is the bottom half of a standing figure that gets sort of, I would say kind of culturally referred to as like the mikvah lady, the person who stands on the edge of the mikvah, the bath, and witnesses the immersion. So I'll show you back here. I have the top half of her body. This form is, there she is. This form is so tall that I had to build her in 2 sections and then assemble on site. And her hands are sort of up in this gesture because she holds a piece of cloth sort of scaled to a bath towel that was woven by my close friend and collaborator, Ricky Dwyer, for this piece. So the cloth gets sort of wedged in her fingers here. There's sort of a cavity there. And then you can see that with these pieces, I'm working with glass taxidermy eyes to create a really kind of discernible gaze where the figure forms are looking at each other. And so these eyes, I don't know if I can sort of, if you can kind of see, but there's this kind of give to the eyeballs, and that's because the form, the eyeballs themselves are set with silicone beads, like small beads of silicone that allow me to go in during installation and reposition the eyes so they are looking at the immersing figure in situ. So it's kind of a complex installation process, but an exciting kind of shift from all of the inanimate forms that I had been making. I'll come show you the lower half of the body a little bit closer. The elbows of her arms sit on these little supports here. And then this is a epoxy clay sort of plug that goes up into the underside of her torso to kind of sit her, kind of situate her safely on top. But her sort of iron red dress sort of bleeds down and starts to kind of turn into this fungus texture, and then her feet are sort of peeking out here at the bottom. There's the other foot tucked in there. And then again, she's on this very large kind of tiled surface that is very much sort of in the language of the purple and white surface painting that I've been developing for a long time. That to me is both a reference to sort of tiling and the kind of Delftware work that I've been making, but also sort of brings it into the language of the pool itself, and kind of expands from there. Let's see. I think we've got maybe like a few more minutes, so I'll just show you. I've got some of these smaller forms from a recent show down here in Southern California. I made this for a show at Del Vaz Projects in Santa Monica, where I'm making these kind of hybrid forms that have copper spouts, copper sort of flower spouts soldered into them. And this was particularly exciting because the glaze, the color in this glaze is also copper. So they're sort of utilizing copper in different capacities and also thinking about the incorporation of sort of non-ceramic form into a ceramic object. Here's the back of this form that you can see. And then here's another piece where this form itself is this kind of cylindrical vessel form is flipped upside down entirely. So you're really seeing the bottom of this vessel. And then the upside down kind of painting surface. And these images are of what's called shokling or shuckling in sort of Jewish prayer practices, the act of sort of like bobbing and moving consistently while sort of praying silently. And so these images are sort of wrapping the form in a continuous kind of overlapping image. And then they're stuck in this kind of yellow, kind of gloopy glaze. Here's a kind of fun, like underside of this piece. You can kind of see the craggy interior. And then the image of the pouring vessel. Yeah, so this is kind of what I'm doing now. I'm developing work for my show at Cult Exhibitions that is, I would say, not necessarily primarily made up of any one kind of visual language. Oh, I didn't show you these kind of figurative forms as well here. Kind of double head. And then this piece that I'm particularly excited about is sort of triple interlocking hands that will mount on the wall. I just haven't finished glazing, but the mounting mechanism will happen sort of last. So they sort of have to live kind of propped up. But yeah, I'm thinking about sort of fungus, inanimate ceramic forms and sort of ceramic and ceramic surface painting histories. And then I've really, only in the past maybe 2 years or so brought into the work three-dimensional figures, whereas before the figures had always been painted and were really a kind of two-dimensional pursuit. So the incorporation of the dimensional figure feels like a more recent endeavor and is really exciting. But I think, like, to me, the ways in which all of these things feed into, maybe even like bleed into each other, is really what is feeling particularly exciting these days, and is also what's kind of driving the work for this upcoming show. Okay, maybe I think maybe it's time for some Q&A. So I'm gonna jump back onto my computer and then we can talk.
That sounds great. Well, thank you, Nicki, so much for this generous tour of, work and work in progress. And it's so great to see things that haven't been fired and have been fired, but not glazed, and kind of see all of these different moments, in the making that you're doing. And I do want to make sure we have, time for all members to ask questions. I have a few if no one jumps in, but feel free, you're either welcome to unmute yourself for a small group and just ask your question that way, or feel free to, raise a hand either in Zoom or just on video, and we can go through questions from the group that you have for Nicki.
Hi, Nicki. I was surprised to see a slime mold in your work, and I know that the slime mold has been used for, efficiency mapping and those sort of projects, but I'm wondering sort of more what your interest in slime mold was in relation to your art.
Thanks for that question. Yeah, slime mold is such an interesting organism. And I think in the realm of sort of fungus and fungus adjacency, there's a lot there that feels like there's kind of a crossover in terms of both abjection, but in terms of slime mold, well, so abjection, and I would even say that for me, like fungus is really is like a materializing, a materializing of kind of otherness or queerness, of kind of liminality. And so in a lot of ways, the slime mold feels like it's in relationship to that. But like you were saying with the efficiency mapping, like slime mold to me feels like it is such a representation of like kind of interconnectivity and almost kind of community dynamics, the way in which slime mold is sort of working together to move through space, to move like objects around it. There's a real kind of threading into how we work together. And I think because I'm so consistently thinking about queerness, but queerness in kind of the most broadest sense, this kind of like relationship to otherness, community and the way we are like in relation to each other feels so significant to identity and to kind of locating oneself in the world. So yeah, slime mold is this kind of beautiful representation of that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Amy.
I'm Amy. It's so nice to see your studio and get to know your work a little bit better. I hope we get to cross paths up here sometime. I'm so interested in so many things, and I feel like nothing that I'm gonna say was gonna make any sense, but I'm just gonna throw a couple of things out there. One of the first things I'm thinking about is your use of materials and materiality, and material as a stand-in for the body and your relationship to clay. And so I'm curious about that. And I'm also, one of the things that I'm seeing that I find super interesting is this sort of circular way that you're working, where you're interested in the body clearly, and you're talking about the body and different kinds of bodies. And then you're using the vessel, which to me is like a stand-in for the body. And then it's kind of coming back around again. So one is feeding the other, but that's sort of the cyclical process. I find that super interesting. And the other thing I'm thinking a lot about is symbiosis and dysbiosis and microbes. And I'm wondering if you're thinking about anything like that, or parasitic relationships, in this idea of trans bodies being kind of, controlled and by all of the heteronormative stuff that's happening in the world, and this idea of kind of compared to symbiosis, parasitic relationships, and so on. Anyway, that's a lot, but that's what is happening in my brain as I'm watching it. Anyway.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for
comment as you wish.
no, thank you. And I actually, while you were talking, I was just jotting some notes down because I'll maybe talk about a few of these things, and then I would also really love to continue this conversation. These are all like very exciting things to me. Okay, so the first thing you were asking about was material as a stand-in for the body. And this is something that feels huge for me. You know, in a really kind of immediate sense, clay is always referred to as a body. A clay body is like the type of clay that one is working with. And even the way that different clays are referred to, like a kind of off-white clay is referred to as a buff clay body, rather than like beige or something. And there's these like really intuitive ways in which clay is always in reference to bodies in and of itself, which I just love. And it feels so kind of, for me, it just feels kind of intuitive that clay is a body in and of itself, but then it's also a record of the body, that clay as a receptive material sort of records the body in space and is always sort of receiving the action of the maker sort of into it. And so much of these kind of morel, like kind of craggy cellular forms are really just built by making tiny pinch pots, which are tiny recordings of my fingers and fingertips. So there's this kind of record of the body in space that I find so evocative. So clay as a body, but also as a recorder of the body. Vessels, you know, sort of, I apologize for sort of sliding into ceramics teacher mode, but you know, it's like vessels, ceramic vessels are always referred to in the language of bodies as well. You know, like the lip of the pot, the shoulder of the pot, the belly of the pot, the foot of the pot. This is, the vessel is a body and the body is a vessel. And I think that there's a lot of richness in that, especially when talking about ritual objects, bathing. I think so much we consider a ritual object to be in service of the body that's using it, and never, or maybe rarely, as like a body in and of itself, or having its own kind of agency in the world. And so that's something I'm kind of constantly thinking of, the agency of the object and the kind of presence of the object as a form in and of itself. I think with a lot of the fungus forms that were sort of like, you know, sculptures of mushrooms or sculptures of, you know, slime mold, they were always sort of figures to me. And so a lot of those earlier forms I would refer to as, you know, morel figure with prosthesis, because they had this kind of gestural, figurative capacity to them. And I think I was also just feeling very unsure about pursuing dimensional figurative sculpture. It really took me a long time to feel kind of ready to bring sculptures that are direct representations of the human body into the world. And I've only really kind of broken that seal in the past couple years. And I still, you know, I like opened these crates when this work came back from France, and I still sort of walk past my studio and have this like uncanny sort of relationship to them. It's like hard to be in space with them because they have so much kind of life and agency. But I think that feels challenging in a way that is exciting to me, and really is what's kind of driving the work itself. Let's see. So I guess another thing you were asking about was the circular way of working in terms of like material and subject. Is that, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I really I really don't think of my interests as linear at all. They're like sort of always feeding back into each other. And so, like I said, I had been making work that I thought of as figurative, but was maybe not like human figuration, that then allowed me to sort of move into human figuration after, you know, almost like a decade of avoiding it. But then thinking about, right, the vessel as a body, the question sort of that came up for me kind of recently is like, has it ever like not been about bodies? I think it's always been about bodies and the engagement with embodiment and figuration. It's just been this kind of complicated, kind of meandering, and really kind of like circular relationship of like objects. You know, I've been really kind of obsessed in the past few years about 5-gallon, like plastic 5-gallon buckets. It's been this kind of like thing. I learned from a colleague about the ways in which like orange Home Depot buckets were being used in Jewish death and dying rituals when bodies are sort of washed in preparation for burial. And something about the crassness of sorry. The crassness of an orange 5-gallon plastic bucket being used for like such an incredibly sacred ritual felt so exciting to me. And I became kind of obsessed with the idea that the 5-gallon bucket is scaled to the size of a body. So one person can hold the bucket and therefore is about embodiment. You know, it sort of like is such a ubiquitous kind of throwaway, like literally disposable object. And yet it holds all of this significance in like the way that it's designed and kind of scaled to the body, and then how it gets used for both, say, the construction of domestic space on one end to like the, you know, washing and preparing of bodies for burial. There's like something so significant about that, and really something that I kind of can't stop thinking about. So it's sort of always like the work is always feeding back into itself. And I think a lot about how each object is sort of a proposal or like the introduction of a new kind of gesture or like visual language, and allows me to kind of move into a different relationship with forms and objects, and then offer something different that then allows me to like move into the next iteration. And so it's kind of like a slow kind of accumulation and kind of wandering through material. Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Amy.
Thank you.
Are there other questions out there?
Yeah,
I
Catherine.
saw a hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to make it quick. I'm so glad that you said that the introduction of the figure was such an earth-shaking decision for you, because when I saw them, I was like, I don't think I've seen Nicki do figures before. And I was like, God, I wonder if that's new. And I was like, what a huge decision that is to move to the figure in this way. And they're so striking the way that you've modeled them as well as like a whole other set of choices to grapple with. And so really, really congratulations, because it's a risk and that's a big change for an artist to make. I was wondering if introducing these figures how that sort of changed the dynamic with your whole practice and like the still life objects and the other things that you make.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it actually like it means a lot too. Like the acknowledgement of the what feels kind of like the riskiness of the incorporation of kind of three-dimensional human figuration into the work feels really warm and like kind of affirming to hear. So I guess first of all, like thank you for that. I appreciate it. because it is like, it was really kind of a terrifying decision, but I think that my experience of making things is often driven by this kind of like fear or curiosity, or just kind of like nagging kind of interest in something. And I have really always been kind of obsessed with uncanny objects. Like some of my kind of earliest relationships to objects has been the kind of terror of like, I grew up in New England, and going to like the Plymouth Wax Museum was like actually a like very kind of early traumatic experience of being kind of immersed in these uncanny figures. And it really kind of imprinted on me this interest in kind of embodiment. And so for so long, I felt like I was actively avoiding making figures, and that avoidance felt really tangible to me in the work. Like I was making inanimate objects, or, I like the language you used of like still life forms, that were, in my mind, always in relationship to bodies, but were never about like the kind of dimensional depiction of bodies, because of this kind of fear of what it would feel like to bring them into space. I think there's also like a lot of, at least for me, like expectations about what it means to be a sort of figurative sculptor. And I certainly wouldn't even now like take on that identity. I think I'm just interested in bodies. And so I sort of got myself to a point where I felt like I could bring some figurative, dimensional bodies into the world and kind of see how that felt. And I genuinely, like, to be totally sort of honest and transparent, like I'm still sort of like not convinced. Like I think that they're exciting and they feel really challenging to me. Like I said, like I'm sort of constantly getting scared of them. And I'm continuing to feel excited and challenged by them. And so I am continuing to work with them as part of, like, kind of incorporated into the visual language of my practice, and really try to push back against that, a hesitation that I think was often kind of driven by like, does this like mean that I'm a figurative sculptor? Like, what does this mean in kind of a broader, like, global sense? And that actually is like maybe not irrelevant, but also not for me, like what should be driving my own kind of practice or like kind of studio output, that it's like, if it's there, it's there. And so I sort of have to like explore it until it sort of doesn't feel significant again. Yeah. Thanks for that.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I know that it's, just after 5 and we're at time. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, Amy, but I did just want to, acknowledge that you've been here. Amy also works with Rhonda Holberton, who is one of our, also another Women to Watch artist. So wanted to maybe just give you a second to say hello to the group, and, thank you for all the help that you've given in helping arrange the artwork for the show too.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamie. This has been such a pleasure. I think every time I have the opportunity to hear Nicki speak, I'm moved in such a capacity to understand these different boundaries and things that we're navigating our own bodies through. And so it's really touching to get to share that all together today. And we're so very much looking forward to Nicki's show, as she mentioned, coming up beginning of 24. With also some other opportunities to show the work in a group context at fairs, in a group show in November, which will mark the 10-year anniversary of the gallery. And yes, it's such a rich community. Thank you so much, Jamie, for organizing this and leading this. And if I can, if anyone wants information about Nicki's work, wants to be notified for some of the different opportunities to see the work in person that will be coming just right around the corner, please either reach out directly through the website, or I'm sure Jamie could pass on my contact to. And there's a lot of familiar, friendly faces in here, people that I already know. So lovely to see all of you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amy, for that. Happy to do that. Before I pass it back to Lorna, I did just want to mention that there are 2 upcoming events in June to make sure you're aware of. I'm going to throw those in the chat right now. The 2 upcoming events are, one, we have a tour of the Lola Amira exhibition at the DeYoung Museum, which will be followed by a celebratory lunch. That begins at 11 a.m. on Thursday, June 15th. The second in-person event that we'll be hosting in June is a tour of the Amalia Mesa Baines exhibition at BAM PFA. And that will actually, before that, we'll have a studio tour live of Adia Millet's studio in Oakland. So it would be a 12:30, I think I say AM, I mean PM, 12:30 p.m. studio visit with Adia in Oakland, and then just a short drive over to the Berkeley Art Museum for a 2 p.m. exhibition tour with curators there for the Amalia Mesa Baines exhibition. And we have a few additional events coming up in July. There will be a newsletter that you'll receive in the next week from the group that will also have all of this information in, and then we'll also send specific invitations for the events as well. So stay tuned, there will be more coming your way for sure. And with that, I will pass it back to Lorna, or if anyone has any other announcements that they'd like to make. And then we'll do a big collective, maybe we all do first. So let's thank Nicki for sharing so generously with our group today.
Yeah, and before I go back to Lorna, I just wanted, you had mentioned Rhonda Holberton and the other women to watch. We do have a talk with Tanya Zimbardo and Rhonda Holberton in person next Wednesday at the gallery in San Francisco. So for any of you who'd like to join us, it'd be great to have you.
Amazing, thanks for sharing that. And we did put a plug in for Rhonda's show in our upcoming newsletter that we'll share with you as well, Amy, because there's some exciting work there.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Jamie. I just want to ask before I make a remark or two, if there are any other questions or comments. We always love to hear from everyone. I guess not. Well, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Nicki. This was such an interesting presentation, and we absolutely love seeing your work in the New Suns and look forward to your upcoming exhibition and visiting the gallery, and continuing to keep in touch with you. And also, Amy and Jamie, I think it would be great if we could do something related to Rhonda's show with you, because we like to, one of our missions is to continue to support all of our artists and continue to see their work. So we'll stay tuned on that. And I just hope to see everyone at the DeYoung and at Adia's studio and in Berkeley. And thank you, Jamie, and your committee for just keeping the hits coming. We're having a great year. So